You're listening to the Our Erie podcast with Lydia, Laythe,
Davona, Pacley,
and Marty, Nwachukwu.
This series will bring citizens, entrepreneurs, activists, politicians, artists, and thought leaders to the table for a frank discussion around societal issues facing our post-industrial city and the United States at large. Take a seat.
Welcome back to Our Erie. We have some of our youngest guests ever on today. We're going to welcome on Makayla, Alicea, and Amina Kranson. They're here today representing the Green New Deal Coalition, the PA Green New Deal Coalition. They are a group that represents 2 counties, but rather than me introduce them, I'll let them introduce themselves.
So my name is Makayla, Alicea. I grew up in Edinburgh, and I go to Allegheny College now. I took a year off when I graduated, and I'm a double major in environmental studies and political science, and I graduate in May, and I'm going to do it. I'm ready to go. I also want to go, my plan is law school. So as I'm getting ready to graduate, I also want to be studying for my LSATs. I've got my school picked out. I've already made connections. I'm ready come next year.
Hi, my name is Amina, and I'm a teenager. I've grown up in Erie since 2010, and I guess I've always been too young to vote, but I've always wanted to do something to, impact my community and just be a part of some sort of change where I live and the world. So since I was 14, I've just kind of wanted to be involved in my community. And I also really cared about the environment because I was like, yo, this is amazing. We live next to a giant body of water. Why are we not taking care of this better? And that's why I guess I wanted to help out with starting the Green New Deal Coalition, because I was like, this seems like something we could use in Erie for sure. So yeah.
Yep. My 2 passions are the people and the planet. And since I've started Allegheny, I have co-founded multiple groups, and I consider myself a social entrepreneur. I see a gap that's missing, and I want to work to fill it with those who also see that gap. And so this was in 2019, and the Sunrise Movement, they were pretty much going to towns across the nation and trying to put the Green New Deal on the presidential agenda. And we got connected with them in Erie, and we hosted a town hall in May at East High School, and it was a really great event. Over 50 people came. And from there we were like, okay, we have to keep this momentum going. The same group that organized it, we were like, let's meet weekly and let's figure out what we want to do and where we want to grow.
I guess since then we've done climate strikes. We've done like 3-4 other town halls, some in Meadville, some in Erie. We're even starting out in Butler now.
Yeah.
And we've been trying to just inform the community, work with the community to, fight for things that we believe should be fought for.
Yeah.
So y'all are organizing in almost 3 counties, and how old are you?
Just over a year.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you all just had like a recent town hall. Can you tell us the title of that town hall and kind of what was discussed there?
Yeah, so on Friday, on the 11th, we had a community roundtable that was titled Friend or Foe, Should Erie Embrace International Recycling Group's Proposed Plastic Processing Facility? This recording is available on our Facebook page. It's the Green New Deal Coalition. We can send the link to anybody also. And we hosted this because just this past summer, International Recycling Group, IRG as we call it, they announced that they would be developing the largest of its kind in the world plastic processing facility in the city of Erie. They cite it as a $100 million investment, and yet, they held a one public meeting, and yet the environmental impacts of their plan remain unclear. The environmental impacts, the potential human impacts, and another major concern is that they are greenwashing or intentionally misleading the public in their process. And so we held this roundtable as really what we see as the first community engagement, the first public conversation on it that really kind of gets to, again, this gap, these big gaps that are missing, and what could potentially be a really impactful facility in the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and we all, in preparation for our conversation with you, but also just because the three of us of Our Erie were very interested in this topic, we all attended the roundtable and were mind blown by what we learned. I don't know if maybe like Marty, Davona, and I, we could go around and say like maybe one or two things that like really shocked us from it, because I don't know about you all, but that roundtable was like jaw-dropping, eye-opening, groundbreaking, earth-shattering, like mind-blowing to me. And I'm sure to a lot of people, because on the face of it, International Recycling Group sounds like a great thing. You're like, recycling, good. International, that sounds nice. Like, what could be wrong? But, even in like one of the first presenters that spoke that night, she talked about how like this could become illegal, that like this could be an investment that they make that then immediately becomes a moot point, because it would be illegal for them to transfer all this plastic waste across the lake to Canada, which is their plan right now.
And the first idea, actually the first problem, which is just a major problem, is that the project may actually be based on illegal trade of waste. There's something called the Basel Amendment, which got agreed by 187 countries last year. 187 countries, including Canada, but not the US, agreed to not ship plastic waste to be burned. That's part of the agreement. 187 countries, the United Nations got together and they agreed this. But this project actually is based on shipping plastic waste from the United States to Canada to be burned in the steelmaking process. And right now, the implementation of this treaty is happening. It's supposed to start January 1st. This whole project was proposed before this law comes into effect. And if Canada follows the law that they agreed to, they should not import this waste.
One presenter talked about how these facilities are prone to like huge fires, and how we could be basically creating like, a high risk fire safety hazard in our community, and all the issues that could produce for the air quality, for the water quality. Yeah, all that.
I agree. To chime in on that, I agree with you, Lydia. That was one of the very first speaker. I can't remember her name. We can
Jandel.
Jan, yes, she was, she had already worked with Nike. She was talking about her whole experience. And, her saying that what we want to do in Erie is literally not anything brand new. That to me stuck out, because I'm like, okay, here we go again, picking up something that we know does not work. It doesn't work, right? And we're trying to think that we're doing it because it didn't work elsewhere. We think that it's going to work here. For me, when she talked about how the ramifications of this, I really felt like, why are we not fighting harder for this? And I did not realize this was a big issue until y'all actually brought this to my attention, honestly. And I really applaud y'all, because I think we need to be having more conversation around this. We talked about the Coke plant and how we were able to organize around that. The Coke plant is now done, it's closed. But again, now we want to bring something that is, again, unsafe to Erie. And I feel like without even truly asking the community and really going in and saying, listen, is this something that we really need? And there are safer ways to recycle, And so for me, I was just like, here we go, trying to reinvent the wheel from another thing. And I know there's just so many. I just don't understand why we do this. Why do we do this, y'all? Like, can somebody tell me?
What stood out to me was I think Sarah Bennett's from Penn Futures presentation highlighted that a lot of these opportunity zones where, a lot of different projects are planning to come to Erie, and specifically this IRG project would be planning to place itself somewhere within the opportunity zones within the city. A lot of these areas are low income, historically have a lot of health issues because of their low income backgrounds. They're oftentimes places where people of color and our new American populations live. So outside of the actual where they would put the plant, what stood out to me was to talk about like to bring these plastics in, either you bring them on trucks or water, and the truck smog air would pollute our neighborhoods, as well as like the plastic traveling over our lake would pollute the water.
One of the things that a lot of people are not familiar with is that most of the city of Erie is actually considered are several environmental justice areas by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. These are census block groups that are determined to be these EJ areas based on the percentage of people who live in poverty and or the percentage of minorities that live in these areas. I've put these two maps here so you can see the overlay of our opportunity zones. That's the top map here, with environmental justice areas according to the Pennsylvania DEP. With truck traffic, you're going to have increased air pollution on the ground. You're going to have noise pollution with these trucks traveling 24 hours a day. And those are going to disproportionately impact these environmental justice areas, these communities that have already been historically burdened. That's a big problem that we need to consider, especially in a county that has declared racism as a public health crisis. In addition to that, if we zoom out and look at the big picture here, the carbon footprint of this transportation is problematic. So as was already mentioned, the plan is to pull plastic from a 750-mile radius, and then to transport that by barge across the lake as well. That's a big carbon footprint that we're talking about. Kind of moving in the wrong direction if we want to address climate change. And then finally, when the plastic flakes reach their destination across the lake, that plastic is going to be injected into a blast furnace with coke in order to be used in the steelmaking process. This process is going to generate air pollution. The steelmaking process already does generate air pollution. When you add plastics in there, you're going to increase the presence of heavy metals like mercury and cadmium in that air pollution. You also have toxic solid waste that is being generated in the form of ash and slag and other components that's going to have, there's toxins in that waste as well.
Yeah.
So the timeline of this just doesn't make sense fitting into, we just had this big Bayfront fight that another group was fighting on. The coke plant just recently closed. And it's like, we talk about the environment and how important it is. And some of these leaders say, yes, they really care about the environment, but they go recruit groups like this or, back groups who are like doing really detrimental harm to our environment. And it just doesn't make sense to me. And it's outside of just the water and the trees. I think some people are still stuck on thinking of us all as tree huggers, was like, no, it legitimately has health impacts. Mm-hmm. And those health impacts can make things worse, especially now during a pandemic. So like Davona said, I wanted to congratulate you about how well done it was. It stuck out to me that even though I know the Green New Deal Coalition is a mixed group of people, that the faces of the organization that day were young women of color, representing the faces of the people who would be most impacted.
Yes.
Something like this coming into the community. So, a lot of times when things come into this town, it's kind of rubber stamped by leadership, but the community doesn't often get a say or even gets a place to talk about it. So what y'all did that day and the fact that it's still on the internet was really impactful. So, people have the right to make up their own opinions about it, but I think the fact that you gave space for the community to make their own decisions about what they think about this was really amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder too, to your point, Marty, about like people embracing this, even though they seemed to be, concerned about the environment. I wonder if that goes back to Makayla's point about greenwashing, which was a new term that I had not heard prior to that roundtable. And I absolutely love it because I'm very familiar with whitewashing, and we've had so many conversations about whitewashing history and whitewashing conversation, which is like the tendency to change narratives or stories to benefit the white audience or benefit the white characters or narrators in a story or history. But this idea of greenwashing I thought was like so fascinating. So Amina or Makayla, do either of you want to kind of dive a little deeper into what greenwashing means?
I'm just going to use IRG as an example and what we think that is being greenwashed, just like the broadest one, which is, okay, this is a recycling facility. That's how they're stamping it. And what we noticed from the people that attended this town hall, the biggest things that they said was either we had no idea that this was going to happen, or when we heard about it, this sounded really great because we thought that they were going to recycle. So their plan is to take 1 through 7 plastics and from a 750-mile radius, that is the Midwest to the Atlantic East Coast. They want to bring those into the city of Erie. We're going to talk about that location even more that they want to about, but that's later. And they, okay, and so they say that they're going to recycle eventually, but they can't recycle now. So 1 and 2 plastics, those can be recycled in what are called MRFs. They're just the recycling facilities that are all throughout the nation. Those are recyclables. The rest of the recycles, the 3 through 7s, are not. There is not a market to recycle them, except to be used as a replacement to Coke, which the Erie Coke plant closes down. Coke fuels steel production. Okay, here comes IRG. They say that we want to recycle, but we can't right now. So right now we're just gonna continue to fuel the fossil fuels, and maybe a market will emerge for them, and we can recycle them. But like, we're kind of recycling them. That's greenwashing. Like, you are not recycling them. You are perpetuating the industries that recycling, right? A big point of this was that we have to end our reliance on plastics, single-use plastics, no good, let's get real. And this is a perpetuation of that. Like, that is the biggest thing, the biggest greenwashing problem with overall.
Plastic waste is worth nothing. Plastics 3 through 7, which are the mixed plastics that they're talking about collecting, nobody wants to buy those. And so when they get the plastic waste in through trucks to this facility, all the good ones, the 1s and 2s, will be taken out back at the cities they came from. Because, you know, when we put plastics in recycling bins, they go to a facility, the facility pulls out the good 1s and 2s and sells those, but the leftover stuff is just trash. And so when they make these pellets, no one's going to want to buy them for anything. Literally the only thing they'll be useful for is burning to make steel. And in fact, 3 similar facilities like this have shut down because the economics are so bad. And this type of facility that they're talking about making doesn't exist anywhere else in the United States, something like this. They say it's a first of its kind. And the reason is it doesn't make economic sense to put $100 million into a plant like this and then not get any profit out of it.
Well, and I feel like that could be a pitfall of all recycling. Well, I mean, maybe not all recycling, but a lot of recycling, specifically around plastics, right? Is that you're really just folding into the plastic production like cycle, right? I mean, like, that's, as soon as I found out that like the International Recycling Group wasn't a great thing, like things started to click, and I was like, oh yeah, wait a second. If you're recycling plastic, you're just adding another step into this cycle of like make more plastic shit so that I can recycle it and make money off of that. And then like, we'll just keep this, you know, system running. So it doesn't really do anything to interrupt that, which then doesn't do anything to stop that production.
Exactly. And that really the topic of greenwashing too. So like the survey responses, we had a survey, we created one for this event, and we still kind of have it out as people view the recording. You know, we've been getting emails and messages every day like, hey, can we have that recording? You know, heard about it. And people said that like, awareness. Like we really need to get this out there, and we really need to have just like these conversations on what we brought up in this roundtable. Like everything that we talked about, break it down, let's keep talking. And so greenwashing is definitely one of those, and in comparison to their plan. So
what does it mean? And I was there obviously, and you had breakout groups, was also a great thing where people got to interact and ask questions. But something I wanted to ask was, what does it mean when, parts of our nation, and I'm sure in future administrations will be more serious about it, are like making plans to cancel out their emissions for fuel? They're trying to use plastic less. They're getting rid of plastic bags. They're doing a lot of things where they're either getting rid of plastic and or curbing their use of fossil fuels. So what would it mean for Erie to invest in something that is relying on plastic in a world where we're slowly phasing fuel and plastic out?
Yeah, it means you're investing in the death of our future.
Yeah.
You're not investing in our future.
I'd say it just means you're continuing this cycle of literal abuse of the planet, I guess you could say. So it would mean to invest into something different, this new wave of like, let's get rid of single-use plastics, let's use renewables. Like that would be the best way to go, because it's a way of investing in the future. It's a look to the future. It's like, hey, not only do we care about the planet, we also care about our future generations.
You've been listening to the Our Erie podcast, the voice of reason in the fog of post-industrial America. Next week, we will sit down with Dr. Ed Jolie from Mercyhurst University and talk about local Indigenous history and modern issues facing Native nations. Continue the conversation at facebook.com/Our Erie series. This podcast is produced by John C. Lyons, Marty Nwachukwu, Davona Pacley, and Lydia Laythe. Funding provided by Erie Arts and Culture. Music by Corey Cook. We appreciate you for listening to the Our Erie podcast. Peace.